There we go. Muted. So many buttons to press to make things work. Press all the buttons. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about SQL alchemy and Alembic stuff and relationships and SQL and databases and all the things that relate to the stuff you're doing in your projects. Um, there are a lot of things, so I don't have anything planned here. I just want to go off of what you all are interested in and see if we can either smooth over things that you are working on or confused about now, um, or things you feel like you might want more depth in going forward. So the floor is open for you all. What would you like to tackle here?
Something that was coming up for us earlier was connecting so we have the input where the user puts in the information that we want to then store in the database, and we can get that information into the program, but how do you link it up so that that information goes into the class that is then going into the database? I guess. I don't know if that makes sense because I'm still kind of foggy on a lot of
Yeah,
this, but
if I can rephrase. So, or sum up. So you have your application, it's running, you're
yep,
able to get user input from command line or whatever.
right.
Um, do you have your classes and database and stuff all hooked up? All those?
I think so. I have to defer to Gabby on that because she's working on it more directly.
Yeah, I mean, according to the videos that we followed along from the lesson, it seems like everything should be set up and tables are made.
Okay,
We're just not
Yeah.
sure how to say, like, take this information and now it's one of these classes.
right. Um,
Yeah.
cool. So just so we're not talking the abstract, what classes and whatnot are you working with? No, what's
In this case, it's it's like an event that has several fields
Mhm.
to fill in. I don't know how much specific you want about it.
An event,
Um, yeah, an event, like, say there's a date, a time, and an event,
right?
and
And the event is
I
those.
think I think we could extrapolate it to there. It's like 7 things long, so
Yeah,
it's not a small one, but a small one would give us enough information, I
yeah.
think.
So say it's an event with a date and a description. We'll
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
great. So you're taking that input in from the command line.
Yep.
Um,
And we're able to get it to, like, print to the screen, so it's definitely inside of the program
great.
and saved in variables. But what do we do with those variables to make it, like, actually connect to our database?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I
I
guess.
mean, I'm sure that's like all of SQL or all of alchemy, but
I mean that's. I mean, so as it's this is actually a great question. I think that isn't really addressed anywhere. It's just kind of assumed. And I think that's not great. You've got we've got our two sides here. We've got our program, which is a command line app, or a server that is taking doing taking requests in a restful manner, or I know iPhone app or whatever. So we've got our like application side that's interacting with the user and it's got its own data and stuff. And then we've got our persistence layer or side or models or whatever you want to call it here. And that's like, oh, I've got an event class that probably should be named something different because I think there's events named that in Python, or maybe not Python. Anyway, we've got this class that has the same fields and whatnot that we need. It's hooked into a database. We're able to read, write, update, delete from the database. So how do we make those things work together? It's pretty simple. I think that's why I think maybe the way that the curriculum is written just kind of assumes that, and I don't think that's a good assumption to make. So basically, these model classes that you've made, say we have our a capital E event event data, whatever class you want to call it. And that's hooked into SQLAlchemy. You've got your columns, and you've got all the garbage that you need to make it work there. The whole not the whole, but like one of the main strengths of an ORM, whether it's Rails or SQLAlchemy or SQLizer or whatever, is to be able to just present those classes as just classes without you necessarily having to know the guts of how they work, or even if they are hooked up to a database at all, ideally. I think the Alembic might expose it a little bit more than a lot of ORMs do. But basically, you should be able to just say in your program, I'm going to import this class from the files that I've got it in, and say, great, the user has put in, I'm going to the bike rave in Bristol, and it's got a date of April 22nd, 2023, and so we've got those either dates or strings or numbers or whatever, and so then we should just be able to say, hey, make a new event object with that name and that date, and save it to the database. Just say like event dot I forget the exact syntax for SQL, so many things. But yeah, then just like object, write it to the database. So that part should be relatively familiar if you're, after last week with the code challenge and making those objects and whatnot. The saving, reading, writing, updating are just methods on that object that SQLAlchemy gets you. Does that start us in the right direction there?
Possibly. So we have the classes that we're using to stick into the database. Should there be like a corresponding class on the programmatic side of things? So like there's two classes effectively with the same name, and I saw Eric nodding. Is that just because the question was good, or
Yes,
because you have?
I was wondering. I've been wondering the same
it
thing.
is a good question.
Okay.
So you could have two different classes, but you really shouldn't need them.
Okay.
You should be able to just use the ORM classes for that. And so like the flow of the program is, get user input, user type stuff in. When they put in the input, put the data that they inputted into those classes, and then do whatever you need to do with that class.
Okay.
Object.
I think if I could add something, like in all of the examples in the lecture, we're like directly saying like rows equals like pet name, pet type, pet age, whatever. And it's just like you're entering that information that directly goes into the database.
Mhm.
In this project, like how do we take the user input to assign to like the things that we want to put into our database? I don't know if anybody else is confused about that, but that's, I think, the part that, is there like a specific like command or method or something that we say like this input from the user is what we want to equal these?
Let me see if I understand what you're talking about. So I just for reference, I'm going to look at the go back to the what's it called? Create, read, update, delete with SQLAlchemy Lab. So if you look at the solution code at the bottom there, it has, aside from all the garbage around it, we're making a student. Albert Einstein equals student, and then it has a student name, email, grade, and so on. And then you just do the save objects on that. So instead of putting in the strings that they're putting in there in those definitions, that's where you'd put your variables. So, and I think I'd like to look at the code here after we just talk for just a second again. So again, like we on the command line, we get, the event is, oh, mine's blank. The event is the project presentations. The date is Friday. So you on the command line take that, and you have those. And as you get those, you'll put them in the variables. And when you're done getting the information, then you create your new event. You say, my event equals event parentheses title, date, whatever. And then you do your save on the session. Does that kind of make a little bit of sense, or am I going in the wrong direction?
I believe so.
Cool. Let's take a look at the code that you have, if you're okay with sharing it, and we can kind of talk through where to hook that up. Sharing on. There we go. Sharing is on. If either one of you want to share the code that we got. Oh, I think you're muted, Jason. You're talking.
Okay, just a moment. So are we looking at the Alembic stuff right now, or did you want to see the code for the which code did you want to see, I guess? I think I'm misunderstanding something.
Yeah, so you have your application code that's doing the CLI, taking in the data.
Right.
You have your models, your model code,
right,
creating your SQLAlchemy stuff. So your question is where to make those
right, where to link those two things up. Yeah.
So let's just look at the application code first, and we'll
Okay.
where we're bringing that in.
This one. Share. Where's the share button? There we go. Okay, so here's the application code, and here's where the information is coming in. And this is just a print that's been put in to kind of this is a print that's just been put in to show that we've got the information coming in where we want it.
Awesome. Cool.
So I'm guessing that is what you're looking for.
Oh, is this the
on that aspect?
UFO one?
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So you've got your input prompts there. Great. And you're bringing in your data. And so that
this just collects the data. It's not controlled or anything yet.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Totally cool. So you've got your variables there with all the information that was put in.
Right. So here's our variables.
Yeah, and so it looks like you've got your citing there, and you're doing the add and commit to that. Where are you bringing your citing into this here?
The citing is imported
Fantastic
from models, and here's the models.
Yeah, perfect. It looks like you're already doing the thing that we just talked about.
Okay, let's.
So I guess the fundamental debugging question: what are you expecting it to do, and what is it doing instead?
We're hoping that it would create a new entry when we run the thing here. So it's not controlled right now. I'm just going to put letters in here. And it's giving us an error here.
Excellent.
Session is not defined.
Cool. So let's take a look at where you're trying to use the session in your app.
I think I may have. So session is here. This is the top level, of the app. Through the setup pie, when we ran that, it made the encounter. It made this the primary thing instead of, from what I understand, instead of like the dunder method thing that it mentions. So this is where it is, I guess, right here this is the top level, and then this is that function that we were running, imported from the helpers.
Cool. So
over here,
saying that session isn't defined.
Right.
There is it there, or saying no? It's where you're using session. So, in your main program there.
Okay.
I think at the bottom you have your session add and session commit.
Yeah, so that is in here. I figured that the import would carry down from the.
Yeah.
Is that the issue?
That is the issue. Yeah.
Okay, so the import should be in this helpers file.
Yeah. Yep.
Then okay, or not the import for the or rather the session. So we would take basically all of this.
Stuff?
Stuff?
Yes.
this stuff right here, SQLAlchemy and
So
order
you're,
and
you're
stuff.
bringing in creator generic position, you're bringing in main menu from lib helpers. Yeah, yeah. So if this is your main file, then yeah, exactly. Where yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can do this. Despite Python. You can do exactly what you're talking about, move all that session stuff in there.
Mhm.
And you're so yeah, this gets into more like, and again, we don't really talk about this. This gets more into sort of like, and architecture is a big word for it, but basically like how you're structuring your program. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of the stuff you see is really like template-y, tutorially, and just like do this. And I think when we get to this point, making projects and stuff, we kind of have to think about the structure of the program and how it uses all the different pieces, right?
Mhm.
So we've got our main like kicker offer that runs everything.
Right.
And then so we need to decide, kind of like if we think back how our React applications are structured, we have our index file that contains everything. We've got our index.js that renders out the app component. We've got the app and then the stuff inside it. And say we want to hook up Redux or Recoil or something. Does it make more sense to do it in the index? And so it's just surrounding everything and it's not in the app. Does it make sense to do it in the app? If we have some data source, where are we passing that in at what level? If it's only used by a component, do we pass it in there or bring it up there? So this is kind of the same thing. And this is more of like high level thinky conceptual thing than a down in the dirt programming thing. Um, so you can do it either way. You can bring in your so you can bring in your imports, your sessions, and SQLAlchemy and stuff into your main menu or the helpers and stuff.
Mhm.
If that's the only place you're going to be doing database stuff, if this is just like literally just to kick it off.
Right. Yeah, main menu is really just first that first thing that popped up.
Yeah.
This right here. So just
Um,
saying what the user wants to do in
yeah.
the app. So
And so another thing you could do here is keep it the way you have it.
mhm.
Main menu is just a function, right? Uh,
Yes.
so you could pass in the session to that function, and that would let if you wanted to do different database stuff in here, you could.
Well, it does need to go down into a second function, so it might be. Tell me if I'm understanding this right. It would pass it down into here where I'd put it here to accept it, basically. Uh, and yeah, this is a second function that it then goes into.
Yeah. So
Um,
so again, and this is more of a program structure question, and I think someone touched on it in stand up, like object oriented versus functional, which is, we can talk about that in a second. But yeah, like, do you want to have it more functional where you're explicitly passing that along everywhere? So anywhere you're using main menu or this or that, you need to pass in a session or need to pass in something? Or do you want it more like file scope where you just define the session up top and then just use it in whatever methods you want?
yeah, I think for this size of project, it might make sense just to import it here and have
Yeah.
it there.
I agree. I tend to do it the other way in general, just as like a matter of habit, I think. I still have like the uh, bad reaction to globals when unnecessary. Um, and even like if it is in this file, I will tend to, although it's defined at the top level, I'll still tend to pass it down. But this size thing, and especially this shape, I mean, Python's not great about scoping stuff, so I think it makes sense to do it this way here for sure.
Mhm.
I think my way would just be fighting against the way it is.
This is a new error, but it might be related to something else. So I don't know. It's a new error. That's good. We've got a new error now. So
Yeah. So answer to your bigger question is, yeah, exactly what you were doing. You're getting the stuff from the command line, you're putting it into variables, and then you're creating a citing with that stuff and adding it and committing it. Yeah. So you totally got it. It's just a matter of where you're setting up your session. and what's using
Okay.
it. Is that
I think that's cleared a few things up, and it's definitely a push in the right direction.
awesome?
It just means that we were a little more on track, honestly, than I thought we were. So that's good. It means that this whole thing
Mhm.
is actually doing what it's supposed to, which
Yes.
it's like only the second time that I typed it out. So
Yeah.
that's good. Good news. So.
One style thing. Can we go down to the session? Yeah, down there. So this is a. Oh no, you're doing it. Never mind. You're doing it right. Forget I said anything.
Nice.
There's a bad pattern that I see people follow sometimes, where you're just, you're doing the same thing, only it's just taking the parameters in order. Which rule one works, but it's harder to tell what is what, and doing it with the key values like this is perfect. Exactly what you want to do.
Oh, cool.
Yep. I would probably put those each on a line. If does Python figure out if you do that, just to make it easier?
I don't think so, but it's also supposed to be tabbed over. I can fix that up.
Yeah,
you don't gotta
but that's
that
just
loud.
the ease of read thing. If it works, totally good.
Yep.
Anyone else? Anyone else come in contact with something like this, or have any questions about how this is working? Yes. I just got muffins. Anyone else have questions about any of this stuff? Or have you had similar issues in your own?
I have my question is very vague because we haven't really done this part yet, the CLI.py file. But my question is like, what should be in like CLI folder and what should be in the helper file in general? Like, I'm not sure what to put.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not very specific.
No. I have a equally vague answer for you.
Should I unshare here? Or?
Oh no, I'm looking at the structure is actually going to help.
Okay.
So this is interesting because, again, not something we actually talk about a lot. And not only like in this curriculum here, but in a lot of tutorials you see everywhere. And I don't know, I have thoughts about the way things are taught in general. And one of the methods that you see often is do these things and it will work, which is great for getting started. Oh no, I have an ice cream cone in the bottom. It's coming off. So, and with stuff like Alembic, or even the way React apps are set up a lot of time, they kind of require a certain structure. Alembic, Rails, frameworks like that, certain things have to be in certain places and called certain things for it to work at all. Not the case here. This is a way to set up a CLI app. Probably the way that whoever wrote the template is used to writing it. Again, unlike Python's claim, there are many ways to do it. This is one of them. So what should be where is a rule 2 question. What makes sense to you? If the structure works for you, great. If it feels better to move things around and put them in different places, as long as it works, great. My general outlook on it is you have your kind of you have your kicker offer script, which basically just like sets stuff up and calls a main thing that you've imported somewhere, kind of like we have from the helpers here. And then those helpers, that helper file does what we're looking at here. It sets up the basic CLIs are interesting because they're more like the structure is more like a desktop app than a web app, in that there's like usually a main loop or something like that, whether it's on a timer or like this. And so basically you'd be setting up your main loop, and that looks for input, does stuff with the input, and those are all imported from elsewhere. And yeah, I tend to keep like a model view controller model in mind, and using Alembic kind of helps with that, or any ORM. But basically, you have broad version. You have your kicker offer, your main thing, and that sets up your main program, and that imports all the bits and pieces that you use there. Is that a vague enough answer, or is that too vague?
I think it's good. So like before like SQLAlchemy was introduced, we were just like having like functions inside of a class, right? With Python.
Mhm.
So those methods would move to like ideally move to all of them will go to the helper functions instead. And then models will just have class definitions.
Mm-hmm.
And CLI would have like a navigation kind of functions for the application, like a framework, right?
Yeah, and
This is something, then do
it's,
this.
yeah.
But yeah,
Sorry, I've got.
am I like understanding okay or
Yeah, and there's an interesting kind of functions and methods are both kind of the same thing, where methods work on an object and functions kind of hang out there by themselves, and you can call them to do whatever you want whenever you want. And it's just a different way of thinking about the program flow. Does that make sense? Or am I answering the wrong question?
so? So class methods are all like functions. Functions. Yeah, those functions
Yeah.
no longer exist inside of class method, like as a class method. Like
So you mean like a class method that lives on the class instead of an object, right?
yeah.
And yeah, and that's an interesting. So a lot of classes in a lot of different languages, like the built-in ones even, kind of use class methods as a where you'd use like a library of functions. And the difference is really not that clear, right? When you import like a library of functions, you're basically just getting a bunch of functions that you can use at will. The only difference between those and class functions are that class functions, have the class name in front of them and kind of just group them in a bundle, but otherwise they work basically the same. Does that answer your question? Or make it more confusing?
Yes, I think so.
Both.
I guess like because most of the sample projects had like different conventions
Yeah.
or ways of approaching this, and wasn't like it was kind of like I just not like I'm just not sure like what's the convention, like I just don't see like how it should be written. So I understand that it could be written in many ways, but
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's an interesting question.
sorry.
How do I say this? So conventions are conventions because people made them up and they work. More or less, better or less better, better or worse, I guess. And so there's like two kinds of conventions, right? There are conventions like we see in stuff like Rails or Alembic or not so much React, but something like another framework like Angular, where the convention is there by the design of the framework, because that's the way it works. Like it looks for certain files in certain places. It looks for certain things to be certain names. And the convention is basically an interface that the developers of the framework have said, if you name your models this, the framework will look for it there and do this with it. If you put a configuration file in this place named this, it will know to look for it. And so those are, it's less of a convention than an interface, basically, but we still call it that. And the other conventions are more best practices. They're less do this to make it work than a bunch of people have tried a bunch of different ways, and some of them have decided that this is a pretty good way to do it sometimes. And that is like, that is, I'm not gonna say it's all down to personal taste, but that kind of convention is, or I'm going to talk about the interface versus best practice. Those best practices are there because, only because people tried it and it worked, not because it's the right way to do something. And sometimes they are good and sometimes conventions are bad, and we a decade or two later say like, oh, that was a bad way to do things, let's try a different way. And so although a lot of it is just, it's in rule 2 territory, whereas the interface type is rule 1, like if you don't do it, it's not going to work. So this rule 2 best practice is, if you don't have a lot of experience in this, people who have done this a lot have tried things, and here's things that work for them, so maybe try it this way. And I think a lot of people see those and hear this is the right way to do it. And it's probably a good way to do it. I'm sorry, you can stop sharing. I'm just I'm just kind of babbling at this point. It's probably a good way to do it. And I think the actual learning part comes in when you see different best practices in the same kind of area and try them and decide which ones work for you or your project or your team or this particular situation. None of them are right or wrong. Programmers have strong opinions about stuff, and so you will hear that this is the right way to do it or not. But yeah, in this case, I think that to sort of bring it back down a little bit, in CLI applications, more so, I think there are fewer conventions. There are a couple standardish ways, like you have the if name equals main thing, that's a Python specific thing. But kind of organization wise, one of the things that does tend to make sense is having like a kickoff script or program or something that either collects a bunch of libraries and then calls a main loop function, or grabs a bunch of different pieces and kicks them off in different ways, or like sets up a UI and depending on the different inputs does stuff with them.
Is that kickoff function kind of like the upper level thing that I showed you?
Yeah, that's the
where the main menu is sitting.
yeah,
that's the kickoff function that you're talking about.
Main a lot, but yeah, and
right.
calling it I forget, I can't see it anymore.
Yeah, that was just that was a thing from Click
yeah.
CLI that does that for you. Lets it name it whatever you want.
Yeah, and again, like different people do things different ways, and when you bring in different libraries or different modules or whatever, like none of this is from like the Python company. This is just from like a thousand random nerds on the internet throwing stuff together, and they don't talk to each other a lot of the time, and different things work different ways. And a lot of people like, oh, I got that, here's my input library they got from this guy. I don't like the way it works. I'm going to write my own version in a different way. And then you have 20 different ways of doing a thing, and you get to choose which one you want. So you get that sort of despair of choice. But yeah, there's like, this isn't, what am I trying to say? A lot of the work that you will be doing going forward probably is more application or framework level stuff. So you'll be working within, some larger application or some larger framework. And you may be writing little tools like this, but they won't be even this big probably. And you'll write them to fit into whatever framework you're working with. And that's in like web development, full stack development. If you're working on like an application, whether it's like a desktop application or command line tools or whatever, there are different ways to configure those, and there's a longer lineage, I guess, of people making that kind of things, those kind of things. And if this is something that like you're interested in, that's exciting for you, it's worth like going back and looking at like Unix tools and scripts and programs and different ways people have done that kind of thing 20, 30 years ago. But for this purpose, I think having your main kickoff script and then have it like bring in a thing that does stuff is as complicated as you need, for sure. Long sidebar there. Christian, yeah, you have something?
Yeah, sorry. Also my voice is going away, so I'm struggling to talk. Going back further, starting point. When we SQLAlchemy, as far as I understand, that's a package library that we download from pipenv, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we download that, then when we import it, when we import whatever like foreign key columns such as those, whenever we import those from SQLAlchemy, then that's when it should work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I installed SQLAlchemy through pipenv, I'm having some issues with SQLAlchemy. I get an error saying that import SQLAlchemy could not be resolved from source, even though I downloaded it. And yeah, I've been having that issue all day yesterday, so I wasn't sure why that was happening.
Could that be imported from source? From SRC? So your RCE.
If this is something that you want to like pick up on after, that way we don't take up much time
that's
from
okay.
the review.
I mean, it's part of the thing. Yeah. It could be maybe we want to pick up later, but it could just be pipenv can be finicky sometimes, I think, or pyenv, whichever one you're using. Because again, this is one that like kind of looks for stuff in a place, and if it's not in that place, then it's gonna bomb out. Yeah, I think I'd like to see this specific error, and we can talk through it a little bit.
Yeah,
I think that happened to me too, and I just like did it a bunch of times, like just kept installing it. Also, I like copied the pip file and pip.lock like exact stuff from like some of the lessons. I don't know what of all of that did it, but that fixed it. Not great, but it did it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that method most of the time for Python. Yeah, and it's just again like two different approaches to debugging. You can kind of like brute force it and be like, I know I did something wrong, I'm just going to follow the instructions again and see if it works. Or you can like track down the error message and follow the rabbit hole and see if you can figure out what's wrong. In the longer term, if you're going to want to be a Python developer, that second way is probably better. If you just want to get this working, the first way I would recommend wipe it all and start over again.
Sounds good. Yeah, maybe we could touch base after the lecture. So
cool. Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll probably see if I can figure it out myself.
Yeah, and if you want to like Slack me your error message in the meantime, I can.
Yeah.
Clayton, yeah, what do you got?
I'm having this goofy thing where I try to start up our database and like not all the things in it populates basically. I'm just looking at my DB right now, and it's like it builds out the tables, Well, actually, it doesn't build the entire. It like so like in one thing it only has the ID, and one thing has the ID and like all of the like other parameters in it, but it doesn't add any information to those things.
You want to share so we can take a look at that?
Yeah. So this is like students just as an ID, teachers has I think everything, grades at everything, but none of them have any information in them.
So this is just looking at the structure of the database, right? Or
Yeah.
the columns there. Yeah, okay, great. Does a student supposed to have more than just an ID?
Yes.
Let's take a look at where you're setting that up.
Should be here. Yeah. Students, like
First name, last name.
Mhm.
Did you do a migration? Is it not picking that up? Can you take a look at those?
Okay. Wait, where did I look at that?
Maybe in the ENV. What do you mean by
in the versions, I think.
version?
Yeah. And did you run the what's the command? Oh, I wrote it down over here. The what is it? The upgrade Alembic upgrade head is the syntax there.
I think
We ran the I had it here as well. Where did it go? The Alembic immigration. Oh no. The Alembic revision auto generate. Is that what it was in the Alembic upgrade head to check modifications?
you ran that a few times.
So let's take if you pop open those Python files under versions, you can actually see what they're what they're doing. So great, good. So students, okay, students initially just has the ID there. Cool. Let's take a look at the other two and see if there's anything in those.
Nope.
Yeah, no, there. What about the next one? And that is grades, and then the students add column grades. So that's adding the relationship. Cool. So it looks like there was no part of the migration that added the other fields to students. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So did you create these with the auto migrate? It looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about Python's auto migrate is it doesn't always, or Alembic's auto migrate, is that it doesn't always work. Is my understanding. It is an imperfect tool, which is infuriating. So pretty much every time, yeah, anytime you're using Alembic, whenever you do an auto generate, go to the file that it generated and make sure it's doing what you want it to do. So if you want, please work. Yeah, let's go to the please work file. There. So this is the code that was generated, the upgrade code. This is not written in stones. This is just Python. So if you want to, you can just go ahead, line 22, 23 there, and add the columns that you want. Just do a column, blah, blah, blah. And then you should be able to run your migrations again, and it should work the way you want. But yeah, I think it even says, I was looking at it earlier today.
Please adjust.
In front of me. But yeah, I was looking at the curriculum. It's like, yeah, this doesn't always work. So make sure you check it. Why do we have it at all then? I don't know. Yeah. Oh no, it was in the documentation. It wasn't in the curriculum. The documentation for the Alembic auto migrates. Like, this is not a perfect system. Always check your stuff.
So auto generate is pretty much for what versions, what the files and versions are generating. Is that where that information gets sent to?
Yeah, so my understanding of it, which is imperfect, is that when you run that, it looks at your models files. So in this case, models PY. I think so for this project, taking a step up, for this project, it has you put all your models in one file. I think someone commented about that earlier today. You don't have to do it that way. You can, like we did for Coachella stuff, you can put, and I think it's better, put each class in its own file, and it should be able to pick them up. You just have to import them there. It's just more clear mentally for me. If this works for you, great. But coming back down a level, the auto generate should be able to find all of those files in there. I don't think it requires it to call model to be called models PI. I could be wrong. But yeah, so when you run it, it looks at your models, Python files, looks at the code written, and then will generate these migrations. From that, it should be able to look at the current schema and those files and detect the differences. And if there's a difference, then generate the right stuff. Again,
can I say something clean real quick? I'm sorry. You've got the comma after the second one.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I know you were looking at like, why isn't it working?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark. I just wanted to let him
No,
know.
you're good. You're good.
Actually, one other thing. Didn't mean to cut you off.
You want to comment after line 24 there too?
Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like we hard coded this into the actual version so it could work.
Mhm.
That, I guess that doesn't really tell us whether our actual code was wrong or not. How do we know that we were doing that the error wasn't on our end and it wasn't on Alembic generators? And
Yeah, I mean, it's just debugging, right? But like first step is always check the auto generated files, make sure it's what you want. If it's clearly not, then that's the first thing that needs to be fixed. You know, if that looks right, and you're getting this class doesn't have a column of this in it in your code, look at where it's throwing that error, look at your code, see if there's a typo, see if you're importing the right stuff. Yeah, it's just like debugging anything else. It's just finding where the problem is first, and then figuring out what the problem is, and then figuring out how to fix it. It's always that 3-step process.
I think you have to run it again, Clayton, from what Mark said.
Yeah. That's Alembic upgrade. That ran. 8. No.
That's still the same.
What is maybe you have to do a rollback on it. I don't remember the command for that.
The long one.
Let me see. Undo. Downgrade. This is SQLDB there. Is that your database file?
Yeah.
This is using SQLite still, right?
Yeah.
SQLite is so all databases are just literally just files on your computer. In this case, it is a single file. You can just delete that file.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Can we delete it and just repopulate it again?
Yeah, you can just blow it away and have it generated again. Worst case, that's my sledgehammer go-to. Like delete the database file, start from scratch. In more mature databases, you can't just do that, but you can still do the same thing.
Oh, why is it red? Oh, there we go.
Hey,
there we go.
Hey.
Cool. So now you should be able to do all your population and all the stuff you need to do.
Well, the other weird thing is that the data doesn't go in here. There's no records. There should be records in here. We have stuff in seed that should be going in here.
Is there and again, I'm you have your you can't see my cursor in that initial seed data. Is that what you're looking at there,
Yeah.
or are you doing another?
Right there.
Cool. Are you getting any? So again, this is just Python code. There's nothing special. Is it throwing any errors? If not, I would start by either. Yeah, I would do it by putting print statements in there to see what's what. Or you could try and use a debugger on it. But either way, like it's just Python code, so you can see if it's failing somewhere. You can do checks along the way, whichever debugging method you prefer.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Clayton, is it possible to do the right click on the SQL.db to see if you can open a database?
Oh, we have an extension for that.
Yeah, it's an extension. It's called SQLite Viewer.
Yeah. Okay. That's the only way to see the SQL Explorer.
That's the only way.
There's other ways, but that's what we downloaded.
Yeah, because I have the same thing. So I'm kind of confused because I can't open the SQL Explorer for some reason. And yeah, because I'm seeing your stuff and I'm like, okay, I have the same thing, but I just don't know how it's actually working.
Yeah, SQL Explorer is good for a lot of things. If you just want to look at the stuff, this is a good.
Yeah, I can't look at the stuff actually because I can't have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Cool. Yeah, so my suggestion would just be start debugging that seed file, and then when you run it, see exactly what it's doing. If you're getting errors anywhere, I don't know if you have to. I don't think words. I don't think Alembic needs to roll it back when you're running seeds. I think it just throws the stuff in there. I could be wrong. If there's any unique constraints or anything in there that it's looking for, or if it's not overwriting that data, but you just blew away the database, so it should work. It shouldn't be a problem there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say just see if you're getting any errors, go through and start debugging this file. It's just Python.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Cool. Anything else you want to talk about? Anyone's having any trouble getting this stuff set up or hooked up or anything else like that?
I guess, I mean, how would you go about sort of grabbing and parsing user input? Would you just use the input function?
Yeah.
Or like, is there a more, complex way of doing it that's just more robust?
There are a lot of ways to do it. Let me take a look at what yeah, so right now you're basically just getting text input in from the command line there. And yeah, so that's a great start. If you want to make sure you have things in a certain format, like numbers or whatever, you're just gonna be doing that conversion by hand. If you want to strip white spaces or make sure like, oh, this has to be all lowercase, or this has to have, no special characters in it or whatever. That's just up to using Python string methods to parse that apart. Is there more like a more specific question about that, or?
Not really.
Okay.
I've seen the sample projects that you sent us, and in when Jason shared his screen, I've seen multiple different ways that people have used to get inputs.
Yeah.
I saw Jason was using like a click.prompt, which I hadn't seen before. Other people obviously just using input with what's up?
That click prompt is part of a library that you can import.
Oh, for sure. Which
Click.
library?
It's called Click CLI. Yeah.
It allows I'm assuming it's just like
it's just import Click.
line?
Yeah, you just have
but like it just like lets you click on options in the command line without like having to type anything, or
no. So far it has had nothing to do with actually clicking on anything.
Yeah, I think it's a words on fly. Very clever.
It's just
yeah. Yeah, and that's, I guess, to answer the broader question there, there are a lot of ways to do it. People have written a lot of apps like this, and there are a lot of libraries available, both for input and like making your output different colors or formatting a certain way. There's billions of libraries for that. So I would say instead of coming out from what what can I do, the answer to what can you do is pretty much anything. I would start with what do I want to do, and then search to see if someone has made an easy way to do that, and bring libraries in to do that with. That's always and it's always nice to see what's out there. So, oh, there's something that formats, if I give it a date, it'll format it and highlight it this way or whatever, or it'll, you might not need it for this project. You might just see it as you're browsing, but then a year down the road, you'll be like, oh yeah, there's that date formatting thing I needed. Or I know that it exists and I can search for it again. Or I want to do text animation or whatever, which is super fun. Cool. We're coming
also,
go ahead.
I do have another question, but it's very specific to my project. So Jason, if you want to go first.
Okay. Mine's a little less specific, but do you know of any good ways to, for instance, I want the user to respond to a question, but I want it to immediately check that question to make, or check the answer to make sure that it's valid. Do you, I'm having trouble kind of parsing what I can think of using a while loop, right? To just say, while the answer meets these requirements or doesn't meet these requirements, do this.
Yep.
Is that just the best way to do it? Because
that's
loops feel like they seem like they use a lot of memory space or something, but maybe I'm just wrong.
Definitely don't worry about that at all. Yeah. Okay. Unless you're doing something a lot bigger.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'll do it that way.
Yeah. Again, that is the most basic way to do it. If I didn't want to look into it any further, that's definitely the way that I would do it. I'm sure there are libraries available that will do stuff like that for you. You're free to find them. Eric, did you want to hit yours real quick?
Yes. So as part of my project, I want to implement a sort of fuzzy attribute matching search function. That the way I'm visualizing it is essentially, so in my project, we're going to have meals with attributes like, what kind of meat they have, what kind of vegetable it has, flavor profile, stuff like that. I want to essentially build a lookup table that assigns each of those a coefficient for a specific type of wine. And then essentially the search function would just go through, aggregate all the coefficients, and return either the biggest value or the top 3 values, or for example, for the types of wine. Do you know of any libraries that assist with this, or is this something that I would just have to manually build out in hard code?
I don't know any. That doesn't mean there's not any. This sounds like a good interview question. So it's probably worthwhile to kind of try and figure it out yourself. If it's tough, it sounds like a fun question. Yeah, maybe we can pick through a little bit more later on. But yeah, cool. Definitely try and piece it together yourself first.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah. Awesome. We're about at an hour. Anyone else have any other stuff they want to go over? Cool. I hope this was useful for folks. If not useful, then entertaining. Probably not. So yeah, cool. I'll post this video in the usual places if anyone wants to reference it. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Give a holler if you need anything else. I'll be around all day. Catch you later.